Step 2. Once you've determined the dimensions of your book, we now need to set up a document to actually design our book on. I'm going to do this in Photoshop. However, you can do it in Illustrator or InDesign. This process is essentially the same. Remember, we're going to design our cover on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, which means your entire book cover must fit on this one page. There should be a front, a back, a spine, and 2 flaps, all within this 17-inch width area. And your book in general shouldn't be any taller than 11 inches. Everything else will be considered bleed and can be cut off. So to set up our document, we need to go to File and create a new one. And since I'm in Photoshop, I'm going to set my width, make sure it's in inches, to 17 inches. The height needs to be 11 inches, and that's the size of our page. Since we're printing it, the resolution needs to be 300 pixels per inch, and the color mode needs to be CMYK. Make sure your document is set up to be 17 inches wide, 11 inches high, 300 resolution, and a CMYK color mode. We'll say OK. And that's what we're set up with. Now we need to make out an area for the spine, the front, back, and flap of our covers. To do this, we're going to set up some guidelines. First, go to Window and make sure your rulers are turned on. You can see your rulers at the top and left-hand side of the page. Second, make sure Snap is turned on and go to Snap to and be sure Layers and Guides is checked off. This will be very important for determining the center point of our document. Now let's make some guides that will determine that center point. Click on the ruler at the top and drag down all the way to 5.5, and you'll see it snaps to that 5.5 center point. That's the exact center of the horizontal of our page. Clicking on the left-hand ruler and dragging to the right, this will snap right at 8.5 inches, which is the vertical center of our document. Now that I know the center point of our document, it's going to get a little tricky, but we need to determine the height of our overall book. So remember, on my book, the height is 6.5 inches tall, and I want it to be centered in my document. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to zoom in, Command and the plus sign, and if you click on the little box that intersects at the top left-hand side of your rulers and drag down, you'll notice that the ruler points now, the 0 is right at the vertical and the 0 is at the horizontal ruler, which means you've realigned the starting point of your ruler. Since my book is going to be 6.5 inches tall, I need a line at 3.25 inches, half of 6.5 at the top, and 3.25 inches below the half line. Here's what we need to do. First, open up, go to Window, and make sure that your Info page is open. You'll see why in just a second. The Info gives me an X and Y coordinate wherever my mouse is. And it's true to whatever my ruler is set up as. So I'm going to drag a top ruler that's half of my height, and half of 6.5 is 3.25. So going back here, clicking on the ruler and dragging down, and I'm looking inside of this info page until it says 3.25. Right there. When I let go, now I've got my ruler set up perfectly at the top. Let's make another one that's below the point. So 3.25 right there. When I let go, remember, only look at this info. Don't look at the ruler that's next to your cursor. And you can see I've now set up the height of my document. The next thing I need to do is to set up the width of my spine. And just like the height, I need it to be centered perfectly, which means the depth, this number needs to be divided in half. So half of 3/4 is, we'll do some quick calculation. So half of 3/4 is 3/8. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop, and I can even use my ruler. It's 0.375. And I'm going to drag, this time from the left-hand side, dragging right, and I'm looking for 0.375, right there. Let's do another one on the other side. 0.375. This is the width of my spine. Now that I've got the spine set up, it's simply a matter of setting up the front cover and the back cover. The width of the front cover is 4 1/4. So I'm going to go back to my document, and remember it's 4 1/4 from this point. So let's drag our reposition tool to that point, and then clicking on the ruler, dragging over to 4.25. Okay, so there's the width of my front cover. Let's go over this side. I'm going to reposition the alignment to this corner, because this is the corner of my spine, and we'll click and drag to a -4 1/4. And I'll release. So far it's looking pretty good. This is my spine. I've got the width of the front cover, the back cover, and the rest of it is going to be the front flaps that I'm working in. Remember, you also need to add a little bit of bleed to whatever document you've set up. So in our case, let's add about 1/4 of an inch to the top and bottom of our document. So I'm going to click and drag down, and just eyeballing it, there we go, 1/4 of an inch to the top. Let's add 1/4 of an inch to the bottom edge. Right there. The last thing I need to do is to determine the width of my flap. Now I didn't measure it off, so whatever is remaining, that's the amount of space that I can work with. So if I was to, let's reposition our 0 point right here at the edge of my border. So clicking up here and dragging down. There's the edge of my book. I can see I've got a good 3 inches that I can work with on this side, and that'll work out for me. So I'm going to drag one last guide on this side to 3 inches, and I'm going to reposition it on this side, and see I've got 3 inches here. I'll drag one last guide to 3 inches on that side. Just as I've added 1/4 of an inch to the top, I need to add 1/4 of an inch to this side as well. And I'll eyeball that one. Since it's just bleed, it's okay. And 1/4 of an inch on this side. Right there. Perfect. If you want to erase a guide or change a guide, make sure you go to View and down to Lock Guides is unchecked. If it is checked off, that means you can't move any of the guides around. But if you want to clear a guide, simply click on it and then drag it back up to the ruler. There we go. And it will delete away that way. So I can do the same for my center point there. Now I have my document set up really well. I've got, in our case, I'll open it up and I'll even clearly label it so I know what I'm going to be doing. This will be the back cover. This will be the front. I've got flap 1. And I've also got flap 2. And in the center, I have my spine. And I can rotate that. Oh, there we go. Everything that I design must fit within these guides. Make 2 documents. The first one for your book number 1 and the second one for book number 2. Make sure you have 2 separate documents for each of your covers.